FIFA, with their genius, decided to play the entire tournament with one of the single worst footballs ever created, the Adidas Jabulani ball. Really a light, flimsy thing. It was as if a football had sex with a frisbee and had a bastard offspring. I remember our backup goalkeeper, Marcus Hanneman, called it a nightmare. He said, technology is not everything. Scientists came up with the atom bomb. It doesn't mean we should have invented it. World of change for the 2010 cycle. Meet the new boss. Same-ish as the old boss, Bob Bradley. Came in first of all as interim manager and eventually earned the permanent role. I say eventually because US Soccer President Sunil Gulati publicly and rather humiliatingly pursued Jurgen Klinsmann, who lived in Southern California. But Sunil's wooing was not effective on this occasion. Klinsy turns us down. I like to think of Jurgen flinging off the cloak like James Brown. And so Gulati had to settle for Bob Bradley. Some vote of confidence. But, Brendan, what do you remember about Bob Bradley's stylings back then? Man was just a lips pursed stoic.
Yeah, he has if someone was to play him in a movie, it would be a young Ed Harris.
Yes, it would be Harris. Harris in his Truman Show Harris era, right?
Yeah, like clearly no nonsense, clearly able to lock in with, a degree of focus rarely seen in the Western world, mostly seen in various monks into which the rest of us are not allowed. But with a heart. With a heart. Still a good guy.
Is it a beating heart or is it just a heart?
Yes. It's a beating heart. I will not have you turn him into some kind of lizard man. Stop it. I have affection for Bob.
So do I. So do I, by the way. I admire his journey, just the out of his comfort zone path that ultimately he walked. And I wish more American coaches had his audacity and sense of calling and really wanderlust. He is a truly remarkable man. But back then, the New York Times called Bob phlegmatic and impassive. I mean, really, back then, this is a different Bob at this stage of his career. He really was missionary position coach. His tactics were boilerplate bucket 4-4-2 stuff, a reliance on size and set pieces and passion and the collective. When you talk to Bob back then, it was a lot of talk about the unit, a lot of talk about the group. This is a man who likes checklists and functional tracksuits and lives for suicide runs and the occasional eating of a Rage M&M, just one that he chomps the crap out of and then dutifully throws away the rest of his bag. And then Bob, but he didn't come alone, came with his son Michael.
Yeah, I remember first hearing about him when he was at Heerenveen, as we would pronounce it in Holland. Some of the best kits, by the way, in the entire world of football. The Frisian flag that adorns the shirts of Heerenveen. And I remember hearing about there's an American up in the north of Holland scoring 15 goals a season or whatever it was. Like, what is going on? And then find out he's Bob Bradley's kid. And Bob Bradley's name, I knew in some way just from when he coached the Fire in that title-winning introductory season that I had zero interest in at the time because I had yet to discover soccer.
Yeah.
So I did not mind Michael Bradley's presence at all. He just seemed like an interesting talent, and especially during that era. Michael stepped up to the plate time and time again.
He did, ultimately. At the beginning, there was a real sense that because they shared the same last name and because there was a father-son connection, like in a Cat Stevens song, but for reals, that Michael had to be the beneficiary of nepotism early in his career. I actually interviewed him about that. How do you say Heerenveen in real Dutch language?
Heerenveen.
With that flag, which consists of 4 blue and 3 white diagonal stripes. I think the white stripes, I'm just off the top of my head, I think there are a total of 7 red Pomperbladen leaves of the yellow water lily that may resemble hearts, but according to the official instructions, should never be heart-shaped. I love hearts that should never be heart-shaped. But when you speak to Michael about his home in Herenveen, yes, he scored a lot of goals. Yes, he played a lot of football. But my God, he was lonely in this like remote Dutch town. But he was absolutely committed to football, and that was the lonely journey that he knew he had to walk. And the Hex began with another Dos a 0 in Columbus, baby. And who scored both goals? Michael Bradley. We should acknowledge in this one. Is that your ice in your scotch slicking around, or was that applause?
No, man, I'm snapping my fingers, man, because we're getting down to it in a beating it kind of way today for some reason. But also, hello, my scotch is here.
We also need to cheers, you beautiful man. We also need to acknowledge Rafa Marquez sent off again, clattering into Tim Howard with studs straight into Timmy's thigh. Some things are constant. Death, taxes, Rafa Marquez trying to impale an American, getting sent off for it. But can we talk more about Michael Bradley? Dude was a gym rat who thought only about soccer as a kid, went pro at 16, which was incredibly rare back then, drafted, by his dad at the Metro Stars, but then pursued European glory, went to your Herenveen in the Netherlands, and there is an incredible video, Google it, dear listeners, of Michael Bradley trying and failing to do, I think is it vleerjeppen? Dutch canal jumping?
Amerikaan zijn poging ondernam. Auw. Nog eens zien? Ja, dat moet zeer gedaan hebben.
I went to grab the pole in my hand. I sort of slipped through my hands. So, bad injured? No, no problem.
Did you do any vleerjeppen while you were in Amsterdam, Brendan?
No, man, that's for the farmer types out in the sticks. We cultured Amsterdammers would never do such a thing. Though, as long as you've opened up this can of worms, and I mean that almost literally, I do know that in the early 19th century, there was a sport in Amsterdam known as paaltrekken. Excuse me, paaltrekken? No, that can't be right.
You can just make it up. We're already in awe of you, Dutch. You've already established Dutch mastery on this podcast, Brendan.
We'll wait to hear the sport. It was called eel pulling. And what would happen is people would go to a canal bridge, which aren't very big bridges, and someone would stand in the middle and they would hold an eel. And they would dangle the eel down into the canal, and passersby on a boat would stand on the stern, the bow, whatever, the front bit, and try to grab the eel that was flailing about. It was a live eel, I have to be very clear about that, a live eel, and would flail about, and whoever grabbed the eel first was the winner. Eventually made illegal because people died or something. So I don't know what they're doing in the sticks, but in the city, that's our shit.
It's a 50-50 sport where you can either lose an arm to an eel or just have eel glory forever and live on, which is probably a bet that many of us would be willing to take. And by the way, I've only just heard about this sport, but I already know Bob Bradley would think he was amazing at coaching the eel pulling, but Bruce Arena obviously would be the greatest American eel pulling coach of all time. But if you watch this vleerjeppen, this Dutch canal jumping video, find it on YouTube because it pretty well sums up Michael Bradley's intensity and frankly his madness. I mean, he's never done this sport before. It's incredibly difficult. He just throws himself into it, almost impales himself in the act of doing it, is almost mortally wounded, but is like, yeah, I'm fine. It was great. I made a mistake. I'll learn from it. That is his mentality. And he carried on with that as he headed to Borussia Mönchengladbach in Germany, Chievo Verona in Italy, where he earned the nickname Il Marine. I love that. He was also known along the way as Lex Luthor, Alien, and Megamind. He made it as high up the European food chain as AS Roma, a Champions League caliber club in Italy. Oft doubted as just a beneficiary, as I said, of Bob Bradley nepotism. But man, we do forget just how good this player was at his peak. Can you give us a burst on Michael Bradley?
I mean, just, I remember at Roma, was it in the derby? He scored a winning goal once, and everyone went absolutely ape. Like the nepotism thing is such a strange brush, as though like there have never been relatives who've played in the history of football, and like football is actually full brothers especially who have played, not to mention fathers and sons. And nepotism might get you onto the Metro Stars, and maybe it even gets you on the national team, but it's not getting you on AS Roma. That's for sure. And he scored in that derby, and he scored 2 in against Mexico. Like, his bona fides are proven by that point. He's as good as anyone else we have, and so let's shut up about it. And yet, it still went on and on and on for years.
I feel for Michael Bradley. I really do. He was a real servant of this US team. His legacy truly dimmed by 2018, which was coupled with his move back to America, part of a wave of returning talent, which we'll discuss later in this series. But I do remember spending time with Michael Bradley the night before the Snow Classic out, as we will discuss. In Denver, we were in a hotel restaurant and I was interviewing him. And I said to him, don't you think it's amazing, Michael? You, this kid from New Jersey, starring for Roma. And he lost himself for a moment and just started to shout at me, I don't just want to play for Roma. I want to play for the biggest teams, in the biggest games, making the biggest plays, in the biggest moments. And as he was saying all of this beautiful phrasing, which I'll never forget, he had a hotel key card in his hand, and I'm not sure if it was subconsciously, it probably know him was consciously, started to slash the air back and forth, inches from my nose, with every biggest teams and the biggest games, and as if it was a knife. And I have never before or since seen that kind of intensity off the field in a footballer outside of Roy Keane. I mean, Michael Bradley, dude was our machine. And with that kind of an attitude, qualification was secured with a 3-2 win over Honduras. Connor Casey, centre forward, many have forgotten, flinging himself through defenders and the goalkeeper like a giant bowling ball to get the goal.
The first of our many great CC initialed players. There's a whole wave of them coming, people. Just sit back, get ready. Just know that much like at the Barcelona Pro Shop running out of W's, pretty soon it's going to be real hard to get a US jersey with a C on it, because they're just going to be gone. All of them across the way.
That is Chekhov's gun. The USA ultimately finished 1 point ahead of Mexico in the Hex. And I love this stat because it's so American soccer to find a stat that sounds good with no context whatsoever. But the USA led all teams across the world with 42 goals in 18 games. USA were number one, ... at qualifying. But we have to touch upon the Confederations Cup, which was an epic highlight of this era. If you've not heard of the Confederations Cup, because it is no more, but it was a tournament that used to happen in the World Cup host country. The year before the actual World Cup, the champions of each region would come together to give the hosts a dry run to test out their facilities, the stadia, the hotels, the transport infrastructure. Does it work? And admittedly, the USA started slowly. Phoned in 2 losses, 3-1 to Italy, 3-0 to Brazil. American fan base, really about as rational then as it is now. I believe US Soccer President Sunil Gulati received over 200 emails demanding he fire Bob Bradley on the spot. But the USA beat Egypt 3-0 in the last group game to escape from their group on goals scored. Jonathan Bornstein explained their motivation. He said, it's like that quote from Dumb and Dumber. When we were playing, we were just saying to each other, so you're telling me there's a chance?
Look, even hearing you talk about it, on paper, Confederations Cup, not a bad idea. Not a bad idea. A fairly, tournament that never tried to be more than it actually was. We get 8 teams together, you get your Confederation winners and the local team, and then, just a team that had nothing else to do to make up the numbers. But that particular Confederations Cup, because now I'm also overstating it. I didn't really care about the Confederations Cup until we were in it. Let's be fully forthcoming about that. But oh man, and did it go straight to a semifinal? Is that right?
It did. When we got out with that one win, it diminishes the whole achievement when you say, does it go straight to a semi-final? I'd say there's a rapid acceleration from the group stage to the final 4. By the way, I'm listening to you try and big up the now deceased Confederations Cup. Essentially, listen, it's like the MAC conference in in college football. It was rather hilarious, loved by very, very few. But my God, when this happened, it became one of the most important football tournaments in world football of any kind ever, because we were into the semi-finals against mighty Spain. Spain at their tiki-takiest, Xavi, Torres, Puyol. They just won Euro 2008. They go on to win the next World Cup, spoiler alert, and the next Euros. They're on a 35-game unbeaten run. When they came up against us, they were ranked number 1 in the world, according to the FIFA rankings, which don't mean that much. But what do we go and do, Brendan? Did this happen? It did happen, but it's almost like a 90-minute game cut from our dreams.
We beat Spain that day, 2-0, and Spain, when they haven't yet won the World Cup, but they sure have a unimpeachable claim to best team in the world, and it didn't result in a trophy by any means, as we will discuss in the next game. But and again, just the Confederations Cup. Can't pretend it was that big a deal. But it was not a friendly. This was a legitimate game. And even these joke tournaments, if you're in the semifinal of the joke tournament, even if you're Spain, you're giving your all. You want to walk out of there with a trophy, or why did you come? So for us to beat them was so unexpected, so incredible. To beat them, not exactly comfortably, but it wasn't, we didn't get lucky in the 95th minute. We were ahead the entire game. And the impact of it on a personal level is, it is another one of those results that will put a voice in the back of your head for the rest of time following this team. We can do it on our day. We can do it. And the reason why I think that is because it has happened and we have seen it. Oh, if we had beaten Brazil. Oh, I don't want to get ahead of myself.
There was something about this game. I mean, it was amazing. Josie Altidore, Clint Dempsey doing the damage. God bless you. Michael Bradley got sent off in the 86th minute. I do remember him just staring at the camera and screaming at America that to believe in their team as he walked off. Just a relief and a sense of vindication. But it was really that it was a loss so humiliating that the Spanish players refused to exchange shirts. They stormed off the fields, a bit like the Detroit Pistons when they were finally done in by Michael Jordan's Bulls. That watching at home felt magnificent. That they feared us. They were humiliated by us. They knew America was coming. We believed in this moment that we belonged. We even had the temerity to take a 2-0 lead against mighty Brazil in the final before they stormed back in the second half, leaving Sepp Blatter doing top comedian Bantz bits. I have to remind the US Federation that the game consists of 2 halves. Hardy ha ha, Sepp. Look, Brendan's established the Confederations Cup it's honestly a nothing. It's a forgettable tournament, essentially a friendly. But as you hinted, there was something truly magical about this one. It really does rank on the men's side as a great historic milestone. It felt like it at the time. Obviously, we now know there's bumps in the journey to come. But watching the US take on and drop and clip a true giant, Brendan, it did feel like a slither of our dream coming true.
It does. And even getting up 2-0 against Brazil was, in 25 minutes or whatever, it was absolutely incredible. And then Brazil scored in the very first minute of the second half, and you knew, like, okay, right, here they come. They're mad now. And hey, the Germanys and the Argentinas and the Frances will laugh at us that we're sitting here being like, oh, remember that time we almost won a Confederations Cup final, but we actually didn't, and us clinging to that like it's an achievement. And they'd be right. But, part of being a fan of this team is knowing who we are and knowing where the bar actually is for us. And we want that bar to get higher and higher, and it does a little bit at a time. But for where the bar was then and what we've done since, which remind us the bar can also be lower, that was an incredible day. And on that notion of knowing who we are, to go back to one thing you said earlier about Bob Bradley, sure, Orthodox 4-4-2, sure, set pieces and effort being the most important things. Fine, fair enough. But again, that's who we were. That is the appropriate coach for that level at that time. And we may find in 2014 things change at least a little bit in that way. But Bob Bradley, he should look back on his period, frankly, with pride, and I hope he does.
I adore and I revere Bob. We'll get to what he feels in a moment, because I think it's a complex set of emotions, possibly a sense of pride, possibly a sense of almost unfinished business. Oh, but God, the Confederations Cup, the final, that 2-0 lead let slip. One of my first jobs in America was working in a homeless shelter in Chicago. And the homeless guys, they had a video recorder, and the only movie they wanted to watch was Die Hard. And they'd only watch like the first 20 minutes when the bad guys took over the building and just like chaos reigned. They loved those first 20 minutes of the original Die Hard. And I often find myself watching like the first half of that US game, and I don't want to watch the ending where just the order is restored. I want the madness. I want the wonder. I want that sense of possibility. And into the World Cup with Confederations Cup, good vibes, energy. Tim Howard taking over in goal, latest in a long line of ball goalkeeping giants. He was bold enough to declare as he left for South Africa, "I think our country is going to stop. I really do. Everyone's going to be stopping and will be watching," which I remember hearing at the time and thinking, God, I hope that's true. There was a last remnant of haters clinging on, but they did already. They sounded like dinosaurs. Glenn Beck declaring, "We don't like soccer." G. Gordon Liddy, quote, this is a quote, "Soccer was invented by South American Indians who kick skulls. That man, no one was better at hate and fabricated history than you, G. Gordon Liddy, you arsehole." But the cultural wave was tilting irrevocably. That's what I remember about this moment, towards soccer. We had Kobe Bryant charging over to South Africa to cheer on the US, admitting he wanted to be a soccer player as a kid. We had Carlos Bocanegra being voted as the 6th sexiest man in sport. That's objective America, by no less an expert than the E! Channel. They don't make this crap up.
He's a California native who has made his mark on the international world of football, from Chicago to England to France, making us wish they all could be California boys. He's sexiest man of sport number 6, Carlos Bocanegra.
And then we had the musical act, the mighty Weezer, who wrote a US soccer anthem titled Represent.
Unbelievable scenes at RFK! But the USA just refused to give up. US Soccer 2010 represent.
Weezer, Brendan. Brendan, when you've won over Weezer, is this the moment in which football finally truly made it in America?
Hey, man, full disclosure, I had never heard that Weezer song before getting ready for this podcast. And if I may use the parlance, the patois of the younger folks today, it f***ing slaps. That song is amazing. I would have had that on repeat for the entirety of the summer of 2010. That song's great.
So funny, because 2010 was when we first started podcasting. We weren't called Men in Blazers then. We were called Off the Ball. But like the incredible caliber of people who wanted to come on and talk about football. I think our second guest was Liam Neeson. It was just a hell. Wolfgang Puck was desperate to be a regular, and we had Rivers Cuomo on. I hadn't heard the song either, and I've got to be candid, that song, when I came on and I had to play it, it made even me hate football. So you're a more generous human being than I am. But the thing I drew strength from, Brendan, was that the US fans, that was the tournament when really for the first time they showed a spectacular, just in their numbers, what a show of force. I think only host, this has become regular now. It's the same for the forthcoming World Cup. I think it was the same for Brazil. Only host South Africa brought more World Cup tickets than the United States. This was a World Cup where the world saw the American fans wearing their US flag bandanas and scarves and capes, two dressed as astronauts with a sign, "South Africa, we have landed." There was the obligatory Elvis impersonator. The US fan base, the American Outlaws, Brendan, this watching them felt like a moment of of seismic change in terms of our nation visibly caring, relishing, following, savouring the game.
Not just the people who traveled, but also this was like the birth of, European style, cities putting up big TVs in their town squares and everybody going to watch. This was the birth of the reaction video, which, we'll get to a little more when we get to the Algeria game. But the reaction videos of this World Cup for the U.S., that was a whole new thing. Like I'd never seen a reaction video to anything before, I don't think, until those started going around. The fact that there was a whole string of them, a litany. I think someone put together a mashup of like 5 minutes of them at one point, just for the one moment in the Algeria game. Yeah, again, every World Cup, which is why it sucks so bad we missed 2018, because every single World Cup feels like we moved that little bit further, and this was definitely one of those times. And I think a huge reason why, too, going into it, was the fact that we were playing England in our first game. What little we know about soccer in this country, we sure know that England has a big part in its history, and that England's pretty dang good at it. And I think people had heard of David Beckham by then. And I think that's one of the shames of the '94 World Cup, one of the missed opportunities. Like if England had been there, for the American audience to go, oh, them, yes, England, I know who they are, and they speak our language. The fact that we were heading into playing England, I think, really helped the build-up just that little bit more.
There was a builder. I remember John Oliver joking, our friend John, joking about this moment, how the US players, before they left, had to come out to their parents as soccer players because their parents were definitely... This is the one their parents were going to totally notice. We should say the USA was a respectable 14th in the FIFA rankings. The roster was a classic. Heavy emphasis on Dempsey and Donovan out wide and size and set pieces. Landon had just finally proved himself abroad. A 10-game, tiny masterpiece of art painted on the side of a grain of rice of a loan spell with mighty Everton Football Club. He sparked them to wins over Manchester United and Manchester City and Chelsea. His hairline may have been receding, but his skills were still verdant and overfloweth. He really felt like our everything. I mean, Brendan, back then, didn't it feel like Messi, Ronaldo, Lando? Like within the American soccer bubble, you could seriously look at each other and believe that.
It certainly was, at that point, I think, apparent that Landon Donovan's ceiling was best American player ever, and that he had probably already passed that ceiling. I don't think we quite knew yet that Dempsey would have an argument to rival him. Dempsey just had not yet been around quite as long. But yeah, with 2 World Cups already under his belt as well, and frankly, the feeling, at least for me personally, that form's temporary, class is permanent. He had to have been looking back at that 2006 World Cup as him shitting the bed, and if he wanted to, to display, emphasize, claim greatness, then he was going to have to step up in this World Cup.
There's also a fascinating roster in that Josie Altidore, then age 20, was the striker with the most experience. Ton of late calls up in that position. Our friend Hercules Gomez, Robbie Finley, the magnificently named Edson Buddle, none of whom had even played a single qualifier. And all of that was drowned out because this was, from a noise perspective, the World Cup of vuvuzelas, a cheap plastic trumpet that sounded like an angry swarm of bees buzzing behind every single game. They were the musical instrument that was heard all over the world that summer, the soundtrack to your nightmare. My ears, I don't know about you, were ringing for about 3 months after the final. Where were you watching, and what was your take on the Vuvus? Because Lionel Messi, I remember, said of them, it's like being deaf.
I was in LA for those games firmly, so watched a couple of those games at friends' houses, which was already a development. Like friends of mine who didn't, live in Europe, they're like, "Oh yeah, we're having everyone over for the Algeria game." That was a massive step forward. Also watched one of the games at, for my money, the best soccer bar in America, the Village Idiot. on Melrose. Go check that place out. Understated, and that's why it's a classic. Where were we? I've lost myself. Ooh, the scotch is delicious. What are we talking about? America?
You were just plugging crap. I mean, you're right. This really was. I mean, I look at it like 2006. I always say this was the World Cup, where in New York at least, like this is where I think they call them influencers now. We didn't have a term for them back then, but they'd be like, hey guys, there's this thing called the World Cup, and just trust me, when Brazil play, go out to Queens to this Brazilian steakhouse. It's amazing. And when Italy play, you've got to go to the Bronx, to this it's a madhouse. And 2010 was really the World Cup where it changed from being influencers to on screens everywhere, every trading floor in the afternoon. These games were on. It was the first one I remember where the whole of America was really behind it, which is why FIFA, with their genius, decided to play the entire tournament with one of the single worst footballs ever created, the Adidas Jabulani ball. Really a light, flimsy thing. It was as if a football had sex with a frisbee and had a bastard offspring. I remember our backup goalkeeper, Marcus Hanneman, called it a nightmare. He said, technology is not everything. Scientists came up with the atom bomb. It doesn't mean we should have invented it. Hanneman, you are a bloody genius.
All the controversial World Cup balls kind of like blur together. I remember the 2010 one, the 2002 one was one that keepers complained about. Oddly, the 2006 one was one that only keepers complained about. Outfield players at least love the 2006 ball, I remember. But yeah, 2010, they were pissed off. Oh, I remember what we were talking about. Vuvuzelas.
Yes.
Let's talk about these Vuvuzelas. All right. So I think Vuvuzelas, you go back and watch games now from that tournament, and I think unimpeachably, it's just, it's a horror show. It's monstrous. It encourages one to not have the sound on for a football match, which is not really how it's supposed to go. And I remember at the time, they were like, no. This is South African football culture, and we have to respect this culture. Yes, but it's not like it had existed for the entirety of South African football culture. And you know what other piece of South African football culture I more want to hear? South African voices. I want to hear South African people singing, as we would hear in Germany in 2006, as we would hear in Brazil in 2014. Let me hear the people. Football is about hearing the people. Vuvuzela, I'm sorry, you are not that. Go to hell. Never come back.
Yeah, it was almost as if the South African people were still scarred by Paul Simon culturally appropriating their music, and they were like, how can we make noise at a football game and not have Simon rip us off again? I'm like, oh, I know. This is how we're going to do it. We're going to invent drone music. That was essentially. but into that crazy chaos, crazy ball, crazy soundtrack, the Americans arrived, ultimately settling into Backabung Bush Lodge in Rustenburg. I do remember signs outside the Backabung Bush Lodge, including elephants, come close to our fence, keep a distance of 30 meters, and please be quiet. And the other one was, baboons are dangerous. Do not feed them. The elephants were not the only challenge, because as you hinted, the draw had pitted us against England, a football team who, yes, we had a 100% record against in the World Cup, but we also had to play Slovenia and Algeria, and those English fans, their team, who should actually play with a Latin football crest that reads proper orthodontia, as you hinted. They were a little cocky, swaggering into this one. I remember the dreadful English tabloid, just the single worst force of human nature in the world, The Sun.
Yes.
They printed a front page, famously, England, Algeria, Slovenia, Yanks, capitalising the first letter of each word to spell out easy. And then their subhead was Best English Group Since the Beatles. That was their confidence level into the game in Rustenburg. Let me remind you who was in this English team. It was Wayne Rooney. It was John Terry. It was essentially a group the British press really wanted to call a golden generation, but they never, ever, throughout their golden generation, ever truly truly gelled. They consistently disappointed. Coaches essentially couldn't get Lampard and Gerrard to play together well, and they went through their whole decade-plus careers underperforming. However, we were afraid it was their salaries, it was their hype levels, it was their world recognition. We felt dwarfed as the American team. We were scared before kickoff, right? I mean, where were you watching? Take us there. What were your emotions?
Watched at the house of my good buddy Josh Myers, and he had a bunch of people over. Now, Josh had lived in Europe for a while, so that was not quite the achievement that would later be felt by going to a neophyte's house. But it was a focused crowd. Was I afraid? I was quietly confident. I mean, yes, that was a star-studded England team, but they had not qualified for Euro 2008, if I recall, right? Was that the Steve McLaren team, the Brawley imbroglio?
The Wally with the Brawley.
Yeah, so it felt like we had a shot at this. Oh, by the way, but here's the mild, dark side, quote unquote, of of people, Americans who are new at this, trying to show that they're into it, and we can't be gatekeepers, people. We have to welcome these folks. But one friend of Josh's showed up to the game in a David Beckham jersey. It was like, why? And he wasn't English. He's American. Like, why are you wearing that? Oh, because I like soccer.
Was this an agent?
Okay,
this had to have been an agent.
He was. He was
an agent, right?
Yes.
Oh, Los Angeles, you are so transparent. And I bet you pronounced it Beckham as well. That's just amazing. Oh my God. And probably took a proto selfie on a very poor pixelated cell phone to send to David Beckham's representation in the hope that we can work together in harmony in the wake of this great English victory. But, oh my God, it didn't start well. I've got to be honest. Inside 4 minutes, the US defence carved apart by Emile Heskey. Yes, I said that. He set up Captain Gerrard to roll home, and it felt like hello darkness, my old friend. And I was following your tweets because tweets were now invented and freely flowing, and I was already acknowledging but the Brendan Hunt tweets were like, it felt like a kindred spirit for me with my, I don't like to boast, but I think I had 17 followers around this World Cup. I think you tweeted something along the lines of "can't watch anymore, just so nervous at this moment." It felt like game over.
4 minutes in, and when one of the best players in the world has just already had the run of you, not great at all. But still, that's why they play the games, Raj. That's why they play the games.
It's true. You know why they play the games? So that I could increase my followers. And I did have 24 Twitter followers by the time I tweeted. And this is one of my greatest tweets ever. I think it got like one like in the moment. No, this was just like my tweet was a...
Prescient.
A prescient tree falling in an empty forest, Brendan. But I'm going to tell you, to this day, I'm insanely proud of this tweet. I really am, because... I really am. It's my. If I printed one out and framed it on my desk, that would be it. Because 5 minutes before half time, Clint Dempsey of Nacogdoches, Texas, turned inside and out to carve a few feet of space from his marker, Steven Gerrard, and let fly what I think you'd technically call it a 0% left-footed shot.
Speculative, ambitious at best.
Is so much more positive and upbeat in his descriptions than I. Tell us, Brendan, what happened next was American history gold.
Oh, well, what happened next was that this unstoppable shot made its way into the back of the net. Now, it happened to go through Robert Green's hands at the time, and I think perhaps also, give him a little pat on the torso on its way through. But Rob was just a flag for that ball to just like plow through. There's nothing he could have done to stop it, no matter what it looks like, or sounds like, or that you've read about it, or the fact that he could have just sat down and he would have stopped it. But in fact, he somehow encouraged it backwards through him. And Robert Green, you're an American hero.
He encouraged it backwards. It's probably that's going to be the the title of my autobiography. I just love that, encouraging it backwards, because if you actually watch the goal, Clint Dempsey had already turned away, just completely aware that Green would just completely, simply collect the ball. It was straight at him. Instead, Rob Green executed, I think it's called, it's more than a howler. I think technically within the world of football, it's known as a Liz Truss. He almost, if he'd thrown the ball into his own net, it would have been less embarrassing. But my God, who cares? I mean, even if Clint Dempsey had just blasted it from 40 yards, just like an absolute bomb into the top corner, it couldn't have been any more glorious in American eyes in that moment. It was a goal, a precious goal, a glorious goal. Dempsey started celebrating, and then he stopped. There was a second of him being like, wait, did the ref say this was a goal or not? And Green was like still scampering after the ball like me after I've dropped a hot dog in a ballpark. I'm like, no, that was a $15.95 hot dog. Come back. But it was too late. The ball went over the line, and glory. News of the World, that English tabloid, their headline was Hand of Clod. New York Post headline, USA wins 1-1. Subhead, greatest tie against the British since Bunker Hill. And I don't think that's hyperbolic. Do you, Brendan?
No, it was massive. And not just in the context of it's, the mighty England. And no matter how, well or not great England's form is at a time, for when we're playing them, they're the mighty England, and they are very, you might say that they're the mirror in which we try to judge ourselves. But no, we're getting ahead of ourselves. So it was massive. And as I said earlier, again, a rule of thumb, an idiom, an axiom, what have you, is at a tournament, do not lose your first game. And the previous tournament, we had lost the out of our first game. So coming out of this against our seemingly only tough opponent in the group with a draw, it was a win of a sort. Because you're just on much better footing going forward than we had been before.
And it made the whole nation, because again, there was a lot of people that love football in this nation, but there was a lot of agents turning up in England jerseys under mistaken assumptions that was what one did in the football, right, guys? Guys, stay with me here. But this is the game that made them realise the error of the ways. The nation started to watch. They didn't know a great goal from a crappy goal. They just knew that we had beaten England 1-1, and then we went into the next game against mighty Slovenia. A tiny nation of 2 million people, about the size of New Jersey, that had just splintered off Yugoslavia. I think they were playing in like their second World Cup. The Prime Minister, Borut Pahor, had promised to clean every player's boots if they qualified, and he actually carried that through after their fairy tale playoff against Russia. That's the kind of motivation we had to answer to. And God, we were in a 2-0 hole at halftime. The whole nation was suddenly watching, and we were crapping our pants against. I would expect there weren't many Hollywood agents turning up mistakenly in Slovenia jerseys. We had to fight back from that hole. Michael Bradley, God bless you, jabbed home an equaliser. We got there. The US actually had a winner, cruelly and match fixingly chalked off, the pain of which remains devastating to this day. But the stakes were sharp. We knew in our final game we had to beat Algeria to go through. Algeria knew they needed a win too to stay alive. Really the game, the final game, the whole of America watching at this point was an utter knife fight. On ESPN, Alexi Lalas, he described it, I think live on air. He said, they are sons of bitches, and I say that in a good way. They are badasses. And my God, they fought. Bob Lee described the angst, my mate. God bless you, Bob. He described what it was like to watch this game. He said, I was just walking round like my wife is in labour. In the old days, when you're not allowed in the birthing room, I've never been so nervous in my life. Oh, Brendan, were you watching this game? Do you remember the agony? Tell us your story.
Very much so. This was at our friend Nicole's house. Nicole had been to Josh's house and decided that she liked having soccer parties. And she did a very good job. There were, oh my gosh, I've been in England too long. I can't remember what they're called. The little hot dogs that come in a croissant.
Hang on a minute. You've forgotten pigs in a blanket.
Thank you very much. Thank
No,
you.
seriously,
Thank you.
this is. We need an intervention here. When you've forgotten Pigs in a Blanket, one of the great joys of life. I don't know what.
Whoa, I forgot what they were called for like a second. This place is fucking me up, Raj. I've been here for too long. Anywho, Nicole did a smashing job. The Pigs in the Blankets were immaculate and delicious, and it. People forget now. Like, this was supposed to be perfunctory. This was finally, the reward of these two difficult games. And I want to go back to the Slovenia game for a little bit at some point. But the reward for these first two difficult games was now finally we get to just thump, punching bag, tomato can, Algeria.
Make the nation proud.
Oh, man. It was excruciating, that game.
I mean, we were bogged down. It was a morass. It was hand-to-hand fighting. I'd actually just started doing Morning Joe. I did it every single day of the World Cup. It's actually where I learned to do live TV. I had no right to do it, but God bless them. They were amazing. And I learned to talk about football in a way what I hoped was the widest possible American audience could actually engage with it. And for this game, Morning Joe rented an entire bar in Tribeca. Whole production staff was there. There were a lot of cameras. They filmed themselves watching. It got to be quite dark, quite depressed. It was not kind of, I think, the 3-minute television piece they hoped it would be, as America, mighty America, just, as you say, was just sucked into a fight for footballing life against a truly remarkable Algeria. That's the World Cup, where these nations can just take the field and just have a go against just, they can be outstripped by GDP and military power and, face a superpower and just go toe to toe. And on this day, God respect the Algerians. They truly did. And we entered extra time. Honestly felt like suddenly we were at a funeral, Brendan. Like we'd gone to a wedding that had turned into a funeral. And Joe Scarborough loved football. He really hoped to, I think, grow the game by highlighting the game on his show, this game, and it felt like American failure was coming. This is not the story he wanted to tell. And into stoppage time, 4 minutes given, and please, you can't remember the name for Pigs in a Blanket, but you're still a great American, Brendan Hunt. Describe what happened next.
Well, Tim Howard saves a shot.
With a header, Howard gratefully claims it.
Throws it out down the right so quickly.
There are things on here for the USA. Can they do it here?
Marauding down and like, holy shit, hold on, we have numbers, and this is the moment of the most open play we've seen in this entire match. Clint shoots, keeper saves, and sometimes the football gods smile on you. It ricochets straight to Landon, and Landon absolutely buries it. Go USA. It was one that you could see coming, so it's one that, like, everyone's rising, like, oh my God, this is going to happen. And then the first shot happened, and now your hands are on somebody's arm, and, like, suddenly you're all a human knot. And then just absolutely, pigs in the blanket everywhere, pigs out of a blanket, pigs. There were cold pigs, there were warm pigs. You did well, Nicole. Thanks again for that party. You're the best. So, Landon, I think we can segue this before we even finish this game. So going back to the Slovenia game, I mentioned in 2006 in the Ghana game where he was coming in on the right side on an angle, swooping toward goal, had the chance to play like a star and take a shot and try to tie that game, and he didn't. And it was haunting because I could see it in his eyes from where I was sitting. That Slovenia game, we're down 2-1 late, like 82nd minute, I think, and almost the exact same situation, same time, same part of the pitch. Landon comes down, on the keeper's left, and he has a choice to make, and he shoots it with such authority, essentially through the keeper's face. That moment felt like the monkey off his back. That moment felt like redemption. That moment felt like, yeah, you know what? I am a f***ing star at this, actually, if I put my mind to it. And then to be the hero of the Algeria game, now seemingly playing with that freedom, like it made it a fable. Frankly,
Landon became the Landon that was promised, and God,
yes.
I had spent a lot of time with Landon in the run up to that time. This was a human being who it was the face of the US game, when being the face of the US game was not a glamorous thing. He'd talk about how, he'd say, does Kobe have to score 50 points in a game and then put a suit on and then go and promote the game at some charity event to try and grow the game? And he felt like he was doing almost two jobs in one, that he was the face of the game, had to grow the game, also score the goals. Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. He was always harshly judged, the own backwash of our own self-loathing. And Landon's, frankly, his inability early on to thrive in Europe as he was a big fish in a small pond, as opposed to an American player that could go over and thrive in Europe. This is a moment when just cosmically everything clicked right for him. His greatness was undeniable in an American context, and God bless. Everybody knew Landon's name, which is how it should have been from when he was young. This was the moment of self-actualization. It was like we were at Landon Donovan's bar mitzvah and we were all just dancing the horror around him. I was in the bar with Morning Joe. We were all pretty drunk, sad drunk to be candid, as the game kicked on. It was like, what was it, like 10:45 as the game, what was it, like 11:45 as a game, Eastern time as a game kind of got out of our grasp, and then Landon swept in, spanked the ball home. I remember Mika grabbed the table we were sitting at and just flipped it over. Beers everywhere, carnage, joy, cats and dogs living together. And as you hinted,
Joe said, "Oh, I'm gonna marry that woman." Oh, the passion.
I can't confirm.
I used to respect you, but now it's something more.
Were you there? How do you know this? There was a famous YouTube video of scenes just like that playing out in bars across America. I mean, this was the moment, Brendan. This was really the moment with Ian Darke, that call. Go, go, USA! I mean, Ian, who's a great friend of ours, has no idea to this day where that line came from. And Bob Lee really captured its emphatic moment, its place in our history. This is better than being in the Smithsonian. It's Bob Lee's ringtone, I believe. And it's a ringtone for thousands of people to this day.
National treasure, that man. Yeah, well, Roger, they say it's always Ian darkest before the dawn. But that video of all the reaction things, I can't say enough about it. Like, it was a different kind of communal feeling. Like, you can watch a Super Bowl and you just know the whole country's watching because they tell you that and they show you the ratings and like, oh gosh, biggest watch thing. But here was physical proof of people at parties or public spaces, just like where you watched it, seemingly in every single corner of the country, who all had that same feeling at the exact same time. And that's the feeling you want out of a World Cup. That's what a national team can give you if you're in a country that gives a shit about it. And that told me that we were a country now that gives a shit about it. And another thing, you know how, I don't know if you've heard this, Roger, but a lot of American sports fans who don't like soccer, your Glenn Becks, your G. Gordon Liddy's, will say, oh, it's so low scoring, forgetting that, yeah, sure, there's some bad 0-0 draws, but there are some 0-0 draws that are absolutely compelling and you can't look away from. This was 94 minutes of scoreless, but it was the kind of scoreless that built the tension, that drew you closer, that made you more involved. And then this one time, because it happens less often than we want, this one time you were rewarded for that focus and for that dedication in that desert of no scoring, but it happened and it came through, and it proved for me personally that this whole soccer doesn't score enough is absolute bullshit. That part doesn't matter. It's about if you give a shit and can feel the tension that is available for you to feel. And we did as a country. There's video proof.
I love you. If we were together right now, I'd be hugging you, because this was American football, American soccer, delivering an out-of-body moment for the entire nation, a Sports Center moment, if you will, which was important back then. Sports Center was everything, and this was a moment that could play on repeat in sports bars for the rest of the tournament. It could make the widest possible American sports, soccer-curious audience proud. We gave America emotion. We gave America a reason to believe. This was a truly transcendent moment for football in this nation. There's something about also the refusal to quit that was so deeply reflective of who we are, who we want to be, what we want to see in this world. So I'm going to ask you the unhyperbolic question. Where does this American moment rank for you? Because for me, it's up there with the Boston Tea Party, with D-Day, and the morning we kicked Piers Morgan out of this country.
I guess I put it right above, at the top of the list, right above John Philip Sousa's birthday. There's the day he was born, and then above that is USA Algeria. In third place, Hendricks at Woodstock.
Listeners from England who are tuning into this podcast just think Jean-Philippe Sousa is a Southampton, a young midfielder with a hint of promise.
But with an ear for brass. It was all those things, as I say, meaningfully, culturally, but it was one thing that 2002 didn't have, even though 2002 was technically a better tournament for us. It was a signature moment. Like 2002 was this like pastiche of great moments, and we were winning or we lost. But this was there, with, again, Ian Darkest Before the Dawn, with everything there on the line to be won or lost, we won it. And I got to think that even people who weren't watching when the game started, by the halftime, people are like, oh, you got to watch this this soccer game that's going on. So you're just attracting more and more and more people. And it was such a victory culturally that is what I think of for the tournament. I don't think of the Ghana game that I guess we're going to have to go through.
What else was there? What else was there? Even G. Gordon Liddy was like, okay, I was wrong. I'm way into this crap. I can't stop. Won't stop. I'm like proper Burnley now, said G. Gordon Liddy. I did know this was delirious. Listeners who didn't live this out, this was a delirious moment in which everything was possible. Everything felt possible. With that win, the USA leapfrogged to first in the group on goals scored, meaning second-placed England had to play Germany, and we met, dun dun dun, old nemesis Ghana in the round of 16. I'm not going to draw this out. The game was a shit show. It felt like we were all looking beyond this game at really a wide open side of the bracket. The winner would go on to play the winner of South Korea, Uruguay. Then there was Brazil or Netherlands in the semi. Yes, we were really talking like this in that moment. We were all dreaming of just where we were going to have the party for that semi-final. That's what it felt like. And Bob Bradley declared to ESPN, we could go to the end. Which actually, when you think about it, he wasn't lying. It depends how you imagine the end would be. Again, Mick Bloody Jagger in the stadium. That man is a mark of death. Do not let him near the 2022. We've got enough challenges without Jagger turning out. He sat next to Bill Clinton. Again, the US leaked early. Kevin Prince Boateng, inside 5 minutes. Long run straight through the middle. Tidy near post finish after turning demerit. Bob Bradley made substitutes after 30 minutes. We got things level. A Landon Donovan penalty. All sideburns and composure. 3 goals in 4 games for him into extra time. We look shattered. Mick Jagger's grinning there like a US football Drake. And I don't know about you, but it never felt like we had the energy, Brendan. Never felt like we had the ideas to seize this incredible initiative, this incredible opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, for the Slovenia game, we get down, but we're right back in the second half. Like we came out, with a full head of steam. This game, that head of steam never showed up. It was kind of like what happened in 2002, but one round early. We were out of gas, and it was fortunate to even make it into extra time. But still, it was anticlimactic, and it was saddening. And I remember the sadness of that loss more than I remember the game itself.
A profound sadness. Like I imagine it would feel if a guillotine blade fell on our neck. Just, is that it? Is that really it? Just a long ball up the middle. Asamoah Gyan raced onto it, burst between the central defenders, volleyed over a helpless Howard. It was a goal. We knew it was coming. One comeback too many. And like a wet fish slapping us in the face, we're out. All of that joy, all of that promise, all the energy of the nation finally riding alongside us with our beloved US men's national team. And well, soccer, that's it. It can be so cruel. The finality of it, Brendan. We were just out.
We were just out. But again, for the people who became fans that summer, the people who became fans during or after the Algeria game, nothing cements fandom like pain. So, in its way, even that game will have helped.
It's
funny. Like, no other country is talking about this.
Summing crap up. Like, I feel the Roger of 2010, the agony, the trauma I've carried, the open win. Brendan Hunt, you've just healed it with your wisdom.
Thank you very much. I feel good about it. I'm like the mother from Encanto. No other countries had to talk about this. Like, keep stock of this too, people. There are no other countries being like, oh, here's how we did that World Cup, and here's how we made the game more popular in our country. Not one other country has to weigh that or measure that when they go through these histories, and it's neither here nor there that we have to do it. And at least we're getting a little further along every time. But it is a very curious feature of our culture.
The aftermath. Oh, what a tenacious team. 4 games in 390 total minutes. The US led for only 3 of those minutes. And the real win was the television ratings. Isn't that always the truth? Nielsen ratings were up 68% versus 2006, 11.1 million versus 6.6 million for the US group stage games. And that viewership, this was the key. This was the key moment. Sod you, G. Gordon Liddy, you arsehole. The viewership kept going up and up, even after the US were eliminated. America, Brendan was really, truly, finally hooked on the World Cup magic. Soccer was mainstream in the United States now. That was the legacy.
Yeah, and all we had to do is do our job of qualifying every 4 years to keep giving that new enthusiasm a boost.
Yep.
And hey, it's CONCACAF. That's easy. We got this.
What could go wrong now? I do remember in Johannesburg Santan Convention Centre there was a painting entitled American Dream, and it depicted the dog pile after Michael Bradley's goal against Slovenia. It was art, and when I look at it, and I do sometimes Google it on Google Images, it depicts a sense of the surging optimism that we soccer lovers felt in that moment. I remember podcasting at the end of the tournament. It's actually the first World Cup Dave and I podded. And I said these words. I said, there can be no stopping us now. I truly believed the future would be a straight line march of progress towards ultimate glory. Nothing could stop us now, Brendan.
And yet, we have been stopped.
Subscribe here for more Men in Blazers videos and courage.